you will fall in love with this story. The millionaire had everything people dream about: wealth, power, and a last name that opened doors wherever he went. But behind the walls of his empire, David Montgomery carried a secret no one could see. He was terrified of smiling. Ever since his mother's funeral, when he saw people laughing while he was drowning in grief, David locked his happiness away. For years, he lived with iron discipline, never allowing joy to show on his face. Then came Lucy Summers, his new secretary, a woman whose laughter was genuine, whose kindness irritated him at first, and whose presence slowly began to dismantle the fortress around his heart. What started as an annoyance turned into trust, and what began as trust soon became something much deeper. But fate doesn't give love so easily. On a business trip, Lucy vanishes into the forest, and for the first time in his life, David realizes the price of losing someone who has already become everything. Will he find her in time? And when he does, will he finally break the vow that kept him from smiling all those years? Stay with me until the end, because this story will move you in ways you never expected.
At first glance, no one would ever guess that David Montgomery was afraid of smiling. On magazine covers, in boardrooms, and across international conferences, he appeared composed, refined, and in full command of himself. To the business world, he was the kind of man people described with words like impeccable and untouchable. At 36, he was already running a global conglomerate that combined renewable energy projects, shipping and logistics, and a growing chain of boutique hotels. But beneath that polished exterior lived a vow, forged in the raw fire of grief when he was a boy. A vow that explained why David's lips rarely curved upward and why laughter never quite left his throat. It began on the day his mother died. The funeral had been held in the grand hall of the Montgomery estate, a mansion with marble staircases and heavy chandeliers. David, only 12 years old, stood small beside the coffin, trying to hold himself together while relatives and dignitaries whispered their condolences. The house was filled with lilies and candles, with the solemn silence of mourning. And yet, through the haze of grief, David noticed something that shattered him. 2 household employees, standing near the kitchen doorway, were smiling. Not laughing, not mocking, just sharing a weary, brief smile as people do when the weight of work and life becomes too heavy. But to young David, their smiles felt like knives. How could anyone smile when his mother lay in a coffin just a few feet away? How could the world dare to look light when his heart was breaking? That moment branded itself deep inside him. From that day forward, David made a vow. He would never give the world his smile again. He would never give people the chance to twist his happiness into indifference or betrayal. Smiles were for the careless. Seriousness would be his armor. Years passed, and the mansion was eventually sold. The money was invested, multiplied, and turned into the empire he now controlled. David buried his boyhood pain beneath schedules, mergers, and relentless efficiency. He transformed grief into profit, sadness into discipline. And in every photograph, every event, every speech, he appeared stoic, his lips pressed into a thin line, his eyes sharp. People admired him for it. Focused, they said. Strategic. Some whispered, traumatized, but never in front of him. The legend of the man who never smiled only made him seem more powerful. And then came Lucy Summers. Lucy was 27, bright-eyed, with a kind of effortless charm that seemed to follow her into every room. She wore her hair in loose waves that she pinned up differently each week, and she had a laugh that sounded like sunlight bouncing off glass. When she arrived at Montgomery Global for an interview, the HR department warned her in hushed tones. "You'll be working directly for Mr. Montgomery. He's exacting. He doesn't repeat himself. He doesn't tolerate mistakes. And, just so you know, he never smiles." Lucy listened politely, nodded, and thanked them for their honesty. But in her mind, she thought, "That's fine. I don't smile for approval, I smile because it's who I am." On her first day, she arrived 30 minutes early. She set up her desk neatly with a leather notebook, checked the agenda twice, memorized the names of 3 major clients, and wrote down in a small post-it which type of coffee each executive preferred. Then she prepared David's desk, organized files, printed the day's schedule, and, without asking anyone, placed a simple arrangement of eucalyptus branches in a clear vase. Beside it, she left a handwritten note. May your Monday be as light as the scent of green. At exactly 8 o'clock, David walked in, tall in his tailored suit, his phone in hand. He stopped when he saw the arrangement on his desk. Good morning, Mr. Montgomery, Lucy said, her voice warm. Good morning, he replied, not looking up from his phone. He set it down, picked up the note, and read it. His face didn't move, but his eyes lingered on the handwriting. The arrangement, was that you? Yes. If it bothers you, I'll remove it right away. It's just, eucalyptus helps with the dry air in here. David studied the vase for a second. It doesn't bother me. Just, the note isn't necessary. He placed the folded paper carefully on the side of his desk, as if returning something borrowed. Thank you. Lucy smiled, not triumphantly, but gently, as if to say I understand. And so began their strange rhythm. At first, Lucy's friendliness irritated David like a small stone trapped inside his shoe. She greeted every employee by name, from the board members to the janitorial staff. She laughed softly at a supplier's joke about traffic. She carried herself with the kind of openness David had long ago taught himself to distrust. Her emails were precise, but she always ended them with, happy to help. Her reports were thorough, and she added neat little summaries of risks and opportunities in her own handwriting. To David, her cheerfulness seemed unnecessary, even disruptive. Yet at the same time, her presence stirred something uncomfortable inside him, a flicker of warmth he wasn't ready to name. One afternoon, after a particularly grueling meeting, Lucy brought him a glass of water and a headache pill, without being asked. He stared at her. Have you always been like this? He asked suddenly. Like what? Cheerful. He said the word as if testing a foreign language. Lucy chuckled. I try. My grandmother used to say that kindness saves shadows. When you walk through the world with a little light, other people find it easier to see their way. Your grandmother was optimistic. She was a laundress, Mr. Montgomery. She learned to smile between piles of clothes and buckets of cold water. Optimism, for her, was survival. David said nothing. He swallowed the pill, drank the water, and for the first time in years, felt something shift inside him. A screw loosening, a wall cracking, ever so slightly. Over the weeks, the irritation faded into something else. Lucy's intuition at work impressed him. She printed reports 15 minutes before he asked. She flagged the exact paragraph in contracts that could trigger disputes. She suggested quieter restaurants for investor dinners. Gradually, David began to rely on her. That reliance grew into trust. One early morning, he called her into his office. Lucy. Yes, Mr. Montgomery? He slid a folder toward her. We're going to Itapema tomorrow. The mayor wants to discuss land for the new wind farm. Arrange our trip. 2 nights. Prepare material for the local union as well. Done, she said, jotting notes quickly. Would you prefer a boutique hotel or a small inn? Inn. And he hesitated uncharacteristically. Thank you for rescheduling my doctor's appointment yesterday. I'd forgotten. You're welcome, she said softly. And for reasons he couldn't explain, those 2 words stayed with him the rest of the day. The trip would be their first extended time together outside the city. For the staff, it became office gossip, the unsmiling CEO traveling with his sunny secretary. For David, it was simply business. For Lucy, it was an adventure. She had no idea that the trip would turn into the turning point of both their lives. The flight to Itapema was short, just under 2 hours, but the destination felt like another world. Instead of skyscrapers and endless highways, there were winding roads, colorful houses, and the ocean stretched wide like a sheet of glass. David and Lucy arrived at a small coastal inn chosen for its quiet charm and discretion. The building was wooden, painted white with blue shutters, and the smell of saltwater carried on the breeze. To Lucy, it felt like stepping into a postcard. To David, it was a simple strategy: less attention, fewer distractions. That evening, they ate a modest dinner at the inn's restaurant. Lucy marveled at the seafood stew. David studied his notes. She teased him lightly about never letting himself just enjoy a meal. He didn't argue, but when she laughed, he noticed something strange. For the first time in years, he didn't feel the urge to push that sound away. The next morning was packed with meetings. The mayor welcomed them at City Hall, local business leaders introduced themselves, and union representatives expressed concerns about jobs and land rights. Lucy sat beside David, her pen moving quickly across her notebook, her calm presence steadying him in subtle ways. She knew when to lean in and whisper, "He's exaggerating, check the numbers." She knew when to hand him a folder before he even asked. And in between, she managed to greet everyone with genuine warmth. By late afternoon, the technical team suggested they visit the potential site for the wind farm. "It's only a short hike," the local guide assured them. 1 hour round trip. Easy path. The view will help you understand the terrain. The group agreed. They drove 40 minutes inland and left the vehicles at a dirt road. The trail began wide, with scattered stones and wildflowers, then narrowed as it climbed between tall trees. Sunlight filtered through branches in golden beams. Lucy, who loved being outdoors, found herself smiling at every detail: the way the leaves shimmered, the chorus of unseen birds, the faint trickle of water somewhere nearby. David walked behind her, more focused on the uneven ground and the time ticking on his watch. 1 hour, he reminded the guide quietly. "We don't have more than that." The guide nodded. "Don't worry. But nature has a way of bending plans." Halfway through the hike, the trail split in two. One path led upward over a fallen tree trunk, the other curved gently around it. In the chatter of the group, no one noticed that Lucy, distracted by a butterfly that insisted on fluttering just ahead of her, chose the lower path. The others climbed. It wasn't until 20 minutes later that David looked back to comment on a technical report and realized Lucy wasn't there. His stomach dropped. "Lucy?" he called, his voice cutting through the forest. The group paused. Heads turned. The guide frowned and retraced steps quickly. They shouted her name, waited for a reply. Nothing. "She must have taken the other path at the fork," the guide said, trying to sound calm. "We'll find her." David's jaw tightened. The air around him seemed colder. "We'll find her," he repeated, as if saying it aloud could make it true. They searched another 20 minutes, splitting slightly, calling, listening. Still no answer. The guide finally admitted they needed help. "The forest here can be disorienting. We'll go back to the entrance and call the search team." By the time the sun dipped toward the horizon, volunteers had arrived. 2 firefighters, a villager who knew the terrain, and a young man with a trained dog. Radios crackled. Flashlights were distributed. David stayed at the center of it all, refusing to sit back like some distant executive. He asked sharp, precise questions. Where is cell coverage? Which streams cross nearby? How far until the next road? He organized search quadrants with the same intensity he used in boardrooms. But underneath the calm exterior, something raw surged. For the first time in years, fear gripped him. Not fear of losing a deal or tarnishing a reputation, but fear of losing Lucy. The thought of her alone in the dark forest, perhaps hurt, perhaps frightened, carved through him like nothing he'd ever known. Hours dragged by. The first sweep ended with no trace. Midnight came. The volunteers sipped strong coffee from tin mugs. David sat on a rough wooden bench near the guide's truck, his suit jacket dirty, his shoes covered in mud. Someone handed him coffee, he barely noticed. His mind replayed every moment. Her laugh at dinner, her calm whisper in the meeting, her hand brushing his when she passed him papers. "She knows how to take care of herself," he muttered under his breath, almost like a prayer. "She's strong. She'll be fine." The guide sat beside him. "We found people after 2, even 3 days. The forest swallows them, then spits them back out. It's almost like it tests you." David stared at the ground. His voice cracked in a way that startled even himself. "I can't lose her." He stopped, realizing he'd spoken aloud. "I can't." The man patted his shoulder. "We'll find her." Dawn crept in with pale lavender light. Exhausted but relentless, the teams organized again. This time, David insisted on joining the Southern Search Group. The guide hesitated, then nodded. By mid-morning, the radio hissed, "Tracks footprints. Plastic bottle. Moving southeast." Adrenaline surged. The dog barked. The team quickened pace. David's heartbeat hammered so hard he thought it might burst. Then, faint at first, they heard it, a whistle. "Lucy," he shouted, his voice breaking free of all restraint. And there she was, sitting on a rock, her clothes dusty, scratches marking her arms, hair tangled, but alive. She held a small plastic whistle in her hand, the kind she'd carried in her bag since college, just in case. Her face lit up when she saw them. Relief flooded her features, followed by tears. The guide reached her first, then the man with the dog. And then David. For a moment, he froze. She was real. His body moved before his mind caught up, and he wrapped his arms around her. Not the polite half-embrace of business acquaintances, but a desperate, all-consuming hug. Lucy let out a choked sob and clung to him. Around them, the others turned their eyes politely to the ground, understanding this was more than a rescue. "I'm here," she whispered, voice trembling between tears and nervous laughter. "I'm fine. Just lost. She held up the whistle. "I used this. I knew someone would come." David couldn't speak. The words dissolved into the pounding in his chest. All he could do was hold her tighter, as if by doing so he could erase the nightmare of the last 24 hours. They escorted her back carefully. She drank water, ate a piece of bread, and told her story. She had taken the wrong path, realized too late, and every turn seemed to lead her deeper. She found a small stream and stayed nearby, remembering some childhood advice that water could guide you back to people. When night came, she climbed onto a rock, blew her whistle, and prayed. "Prayed to my grandmother, actually," she said with a weary smile. She always solved big problems with small wisdom. David listened, every muscle still taut. But when she smiled through her exhaustion, something inside him cracked. He felt it, an upward pull at the corners of his mouth, faint and involuntary. He hadn't smiled in years, yet in that moment he did. It was small, fleeting but real. Back at the inn, Lucy slept for hours, wrapped in a blanket. David sat outside on the veranda, sipping black coffee, staring at the sea. The fear still throbbed in him, but alongside it was clarity. He had almost lost her without ever truly knowing her. The thought unsettled him more than anything else. The next day, on the flight back to the city, Lucy fell asleep by the window. At one point, her shoulder brushed against his. David sat frozen, afraid to move, afraid to disturb her. He stared at the clouds, silently aware of how close he had come to never seeing her again. When the plane landed, he insisted on driving her home. She resisted lightly, joking about him making too big a deal out of things. But he didn't laugh. He only said, "Please." She agreed. At the door of her modest apartment building, there was a pause. The air between them thickened, full of things unsaid. "Lucy," David began. "Yes. Have dinner with me." She blinked, startled. "Now? Tonight? Or tomorrow? Just soon?" He struggled for words, the man who could command boardrooms suddenly fumbling. "I spent 24 hours imagining losing you without ever telling you what you mean to me. That terrifies me more than anything else." He swallowed hard. "You irritate me with your happiness. But that happiness has become the only light I want near me." Lucy's lips parted in surprise. She pressed a hand to her bag, searching for grounding. Then, softly, she said, "You're very honest when you're trying not to be." She smiled, tired but genuine. "I'll have dinner with you. But not tonight. Tonight my grandmother would tell me to take a warm bath and drink chamomile tea. Tomorrow." David exhaled, almost laughing. Not quite, but close. "Tomorrow then." If you love emotional and heartwarming stories, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you'll always be the first to hear our next story. Now, let's continue. The next evening, David Montgomery found himself doing something he hadn't done in years, standing in front of a mirror, adjusting his tie not for an investor dinner or a press conference, but for something deeply personal. He told himself it was just dinner. Yet his pulse betrayed him. He chose a discreet restaurant in the heart of the city, one with soft lighting and quiet corners. He arrived 10 minutes early, his usual habit, and ordered water while waiting. He rehearsed lines in his head. "Thank you for coming. I'm glad you're safe. I want you to know how much you mean to me." But when he saw her step through the door, all the lines vanished. Lucy Summers looked radiant in a navy blue dress, simple yet elegant, with a light jacket draped over her shoulders. Her hair was tied loosely, a few strands framing her face. She spotted him and smiled, naturally, effortlessly, and in that instant David felt his chest loosen, as if the sight of her untied every knot he had carried for years. "Good evening," she said, sliding into the seat across from him. "Good evening," he replied, and realized he sounded almost nervous. The waiter arrived, and they ordered appetizers. Lucy teased him for skipping wine. "Always so serious, Mr. Montgomery," she said with a playful tilt of her head. "Old habits," he admitted. "Habits can change." He met her eyes. "Some of them should." For a moment, silence stretched, not awkward, but weighted with something waiting to be spoken. "You don't smile in photographs," Lucy said at last. "I noticed." "No. I made a foolish pact with myself when I was young." She waited, patient. "At my mother's funeral," he continued, his voice low, "I saw two people smiling in the hallway. They weren't mocking me, they were just tired. But I was a boy, and it felt like betrayal. I swore I would never let the world see my smile again. That vow stuck too long." Lucy listened with an openness that disarmed him. "People smile in hard times, sometimes just to stay standing. But I understand why it hurt you. The brain makes rules when it wants to protect the heart." David nodded. "And your rule?" She chuckled softly. "That people don't take me seriously if I'm too friendly. I work twice as hard to prove I'm not naive. Sometimes I worry I harden in the wrong places." He leaned forward. "You irritated me at first because you reminded me of something I threw away, the chance to be light without being shallow." Her lips curved into a small smile, one she tucked away like a secret. Dinner arrived. They spoke of work, but soon wandered into other topics: books they had loved as children, cities that had surprised them, music that felt like home. David found himself telling her about his trip to Scotland, how he'd stood before endless hills and, for the first time, felt small in a silence that wasn't painful. Lucy told him about her grandmother's sayings, about how she once dreamed of opening a flower shop with a little coffee corner. By the time dessert came, David knew he couldn't keep his truth buried any longer. He paused, searching for words. "I've fallen in love with you. I don't know when it started. It wasn't just the trip. It was every small thing. The way you catch mistakes in contracts, the way you hand me water without asking, the way you call the janitor by name. The forest only made me realize how unbearable life would be without you." Lucy bit her lip, considering him with tenderness. "I fell for you too," she confessed. "And it scared me. You're my boss, the man who stares at the world like it's one endless equation. But beneath all that, there was a quiet that didn't push me away. I saw care hidden inside your silence. And when you refused to give up on me in that forest, I knew. I knew I'd already given you my heart." Relief and wonder washed over David like a tide. They laughed together, the sound carrying across the quiet restaurant like a secret melody. For the first time in decades, David's laughter was unguarded, unashamed. From that evening on, they no longer pretended. They informed HR, rearranged responsibilities so Lucy would no longer report directly to him, and set boundaries between office and life. Not because they feared gossip, but because both had learned that true care lives in the details unseen. The following weeks sparkled with small firsts: morning coffees shared, messages that carried more warmth than necessity, the brush of hands in the hallway, the first time David smiled in the elevator and someone noticed. Word spread quickly. He smiled. The staff whispered about it like it was a miracle. Lucy just grinned, knowing the truth. One Friday evening, David asked Lucy to accompany him to the old Montgomery estate. He hadn't visited since it had been sold and converted into a cultural center for children. Now, music spilled from the hall, tap dancing lessons, and young actors rehearsed in the garden. The magnolia trees had grown tall, their blossoms pale against the twilight. David stood still, staring at the window where he had once vowed to bury his smile forever. "I wanted to come here," he said quietly, "to tell myself that boy doesn't need to protect me anymore." Lucy slipped her hand into his. "He can rest now. You can rest now." David turned to her. "I think I can." Just then, music shifted to a light swing tune. Children laughed as they practiced steps. Lucy raised her eyebrows playfully. "Do you dance?" "No," he answered, almost amused. "I'll teach you. It's just rhythm and trust. Count to 4 and follow me." He hesitated, then took her hand. "I trust you." And under the magnolias, David Montgomery let himself stumble through the steps, wrong at first, then better, then laughing, actually laughing, at his mistakes. His laughter startled him, then soothed him, like sunlight finally reaching a room that had been locked for years. Lucy watched him with a warmth that needed no words. Of course, life didn't become a fairy tale overnight. They argued sometimes over schedules or misunderstandings. Lucy felt pangs of jealousy once or twice. David struggled with silence when deals went badly. But now they shared a language, honesty, patience, and the courage to laugh after the storm. A year later, they returned to Itapema, not for business, but because they chose to. The wind farm project was underway, turbines rising against the sky. Together they walked back to the trail where everything had changed. The guide recognized them and waved. At the fork in the path, Lucy touched the fallen trunk. It was here. The world is clever at hiding our arrows. David placed his hand over hers. If you turned left instead of right, if the dog hadn't barked, if the radio hadn't crackled, so many ifs. But some things don't happen by chance. Some things choose us. And when they choose us, she whispered, we say yes. And we keep smiling. He looked at her then, gratitude overflowing. In his mind, he pictured his mother's face, the magnolias, the cold marble of the mansion. And he imagined placing a note on her grave, "I'm fine. It took time, but I'm fine. I found someone who teaches me the language I once threw away." That night, they drove home with the windows down, the radio playing an old song about second chances. Lucy rested her head on his shoulder. David drove with one hand, the other entwined with hers. He smiled not because he forced it, but because it came naturally. Later, before bed, he opened the notebook he now kept on his nightstand. Instead of quarterly goals, he wrote, "Buy eucalyptus for the office. Keep learning to dance. Smile without apology. Love Lucy with care and lightness." He closed the notebook, turned off the light, and pulled her close. "Are you awake?" she murmured drowsily. "Yes." "What are you thinking about?" "How good it feels to be lost, when it's with you." She smiled, already half asleep. And David, the man who had once sworn never to smile again, fell into dreams knowing he would never fear his laughter or his happiness ever again. In the end, David Montgomery's story is not just about wealth or power. It is about a man who carried silence in his heart for too long until someone with genuine light reminded him how to live. Lucy Summers never tried to change him. She simply stayed true to herself, and in doing so, helped him rediscover what he had buried. The moral is simple, yet profound. Sometimes the strongest armor we build to protect ourselves is the very thing that keeps us from happiness. And sometimes, all it takes is the courage to let someone in, to trust, to risk, and to smile again. Because love has the power to heal even the deepest wounds, and a single genuine smile can be the beginning of a brand new life.
And now, I want to hear from you. What part of this story touched your heart the most? Tell me in the comments below. I'd love to read your thoughts. And don't forget, if you enjoyed this story, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of our next powerful and emotional stories. Because sometimes, behind every silence, there's a voice waiting to be heard.